Welcome back to The Big Show. It's Alex Belfield talking to the biggest stars in the world and some of my favourite people, and it's always nice to talk to John Illsley. How are you?
I'm very well, Alex, thank you.
Isn't it funny how this Dire Straits won't leave you alone? You keep doing other projects, but everybody still wants to listen to and talk about Dire Straits.
I suppose it's quite a big deal, isn't it? I mean, it was a big deal. I mean, we sold a few records, so I suppose quite a few people are, they have it on their, iPods and their, on their machines at home, and they do listen to it on a regular basis. I mean, that's just the way it is. You can't get away from it, you're right.
I mean, we're still banging these tunes out every single day. People still love to hear them. Did you think they'd be as contemporary 20 years after they were created?
I think the Straits was very fortunate in having somebody who wrote songs that have a pretty timeless quality to them, and also when we were actually making these records, we made them in a way that gave them some sort of element of timelessness. Not trying to do that, but I think just by the sheer nature of spending a lot of time trying to get it right, making them feel right, and you're working with very good material, you end up with something that probably has legs and is not going to be over in 6 weeks or 2 months or whatever. And it gives me a great deal of pleasure to turn the radio on sometimes and hear an old Straits track coming down. It still sounds fresh. Tell
us your story. You were born in Leicester. When did music come into your life?
I suppose when I first started listening to things like Radio Luxembourg and on a crystal radio set in my bedroom. When I was about 12, 13, 12, something like that. Yeah, and things like all the stuff coming in from America, like Buddy Holly and Chuck Berry and Elvis and stuff. Those were the first things that I cut my teeth on. There was something about early rock and roll music which had some joy in it and some possibility in it. This was before the Beatles really came out. You're listening to things like Hound Dog and those early Sweet Little 16 from Chuck Berry and things. I mean, there's such freshness to them and such sort of life in them. I just wanted to pick the guitar up and try and learn how to play them for some reason. I don't know why. I mean, there was no particular musical tradition in my family. I mean, my mother could sing a bit, but that was about it. And so there was no nobody was teaching me how to play the piano. I just thought I want to be part of that, whatever that is. I didn't quite know what it was, but I wanted to be part of it. So I learned how to play the guitar.
You see, for me, the bass is what gives the group its heart. And especially with your type of music, you've kind of got the fun gig, really, haven't you?
I've got the easy bit. I've only got 4 strings to play. Yeah, well, it really springs from the way that I've always played the instrument, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I was somewhat forced into playing the bass when I was about 15 or 16 because the local school band that I wanted to join said, well, you can only join if you play the bass. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll play the bass then, because at that particular point in time, I just wanted to be in the band, and play music. So I ended up being the bass player, and I thought, actually, this really suits me, that it feels good, it feels right, that I should be playing this instrument. And at that time, I had an old violin bass, like one McCartney plays. And I wish I had it now. My God, that'd be worth a few quid.
But I'd like to put that on eBay.
Oh boy, if you can find them. And so that's why I became a bass player. But I've always played the guitar, whether it's be strumming it and I write on the guitar. I wrote the first 2 records on the guitar that I did in the 80s, and I wrote a lot of the stuff that on the Streets of Heaven album, on the guitar or the piano. And so, the bass is really, I suppose, it's got my soul in it. And when Mark and I first started playing together, that was straight away the straight sound. Because the way he plays the guitar, he hits the bass string with his thumb. And that's where I used to play the bass note. So you get this sort of nice bounce going on through the music. And if you listen to the early Straits music, that's what it's all about. And of course, you just build up a style, and that's what you end up with.
Tell me how you met Mark Knopfler and how he came into your life.
Well, I used to share a flat with his brother David, a council flat in southeast London, because I was at university then at Goldsmiths College doing a sociology degree, and Mark I went out one night, and I didn't know Mark was coming down to stay that weekend, because he used to come and visit David from time to time, and I came back in about 9 o'clock in the morning from being out all night, misbehaving myself, and walked into the what was the lounge room. You couldn't really call it a lounge; only had one chair in it, and found him lying on the floor, fast asleep, with a guitar over his lap. And I thought, oh, and he sort of stirred as I walked in, making a cup of tea, and he said, "Oh, you must be John." And I said, "Oh, you must be Mark." And I said, "I'm making a cup of tea." And he said, "Oh, I'll have a cup of tea." And we sat down and started talking. We've been mates ever since. So.
From a bag of Tetleys, you went on to create one of the world's most renowned bands ever.
Yeah. We had a serious amount of fun. I mean, you know, he and I are still great mates. And, you know, I've got two natural brothers, and I would say he's probably my third. You know what I mean? We're very close. And, you know, when we decided to pack the band in, you know, from all that touring and stuff like that, we decided on a very amicable, decision, and it was never a problem. It's never been a problem for him and I at all. You know, there's certainly no disagreement about, about things, and never was in the band. So I mean, it's always been very easy.
When you first played together, was it kismet? Did it just work from the beginning?
Straight away. I mean, you know, over the years I've played with all sorts of musicians, and you know, you don't fall into a natural rhythm with a lot of people, but with him I did. I mean, you know, he's a very easy player to play with, if you like. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying that because he's an easy guitar player, because he's not. He's quite a complex instrumentalist, but for some reason, you know, we just clicked, and so it was never really a problem. So, I mean, you know, we could sit down tomorrow and start playing together, and it would be, you know, like it was 30 years ago or 20 years ago, whatever. You know, it wouldn't be a problem.
Which of those first early days songs are you most proud of and you think sums up Dire Straits the best?
Oh, gosh, that's such a big question, isn't it? When you've got such a massive musical legacy behind you, that's very tricky. I mean, the thing is, even with this new band of mine, I never tire of play. I now sing and play the guitar and play the old Straits songs. I never really tire of playing things like Sultans, or, you know, we played Walk of Life in Germany the other day, and obviously Money for Nothing and such like. I don't play it the way he does, obviously, but I give it my own interpretation.
Is it nice knowing when you start something like Walk of Life, within 2 notes they'll know what you're going to play?
It's kind of scary. It's kind of scary, actually. I mean, it is kind of scary. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. You play those opening bars, and everybody goes, "Oh yeah, we know this one. Play some more of those." And of course, you try to play them the new record, and they actually they were Germany. They were very receptive. We just did a couple of gigs over there, Hamburg and Berlin, and they went very well.
All right, let's take Walk of Life, and then we'll be back with John Illsley from Dire Straits here on your favourite local radio station. We're back on your favourite local radio station. It's Alex Belfield talking to John Illsley from Dire Straits, The Walk of Life. Probably one of the most famous songs by Dire Straits, but then again, they all are, aren't they, really? Money for Nothing, and all those songs you just mentioned are internationally successful. I want to ask you, John, I didn't ask you this last time we spoke, but how sexy was your life when you were at your peak?
How sexy?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness, that's a hell of a question, isn't it? Well, you know, I suppose, to put it bluntly, you know, standing on a stage holding a guitar in front of a lot of people, I suppose is quite a, you know, sexual experience, if you like. I mean, you know, look, I mean, you know, being in a rock and roll band, you know, and some people join rock and roll bands so they can get laid. I mean, I'm not saying that's the reason why I joined a rock and roll band, but you know, when you're younger, it's sort of it's probably quite an appealing sort of element to it.
Do you wish you could go back to those days now in terms of your fame, aside from the obvious?
I'm not quite sure where this is going, Alex. You know, I'm a happy married man now with 4 children, and I'm
just trying to get my head round what it's like to be a guy who's played in America, in South Africa, in Germany, in Paris, and in London on all different radio stations. That kind of fame is so rare and only known by like Paul McCartney and Elton John and Rod Stewart. Do you know what I mean? There aren't many people have your level of fame.
No, we were very fortunate in the band. You know, to put it simply, the band sold records all over the world. It wasn't just big in Australia or big in America or, you know, big in Germany. I mean, everywhere we went, we seemed to conjure up quite a few fans, and you know, it was always I say easy. It wasn't easy in the early days, but it was much easier to get gigs. You know, all over the world. So you've got to travel a lot, you've got to see places, you've got to meet different kinds of people. And I mean, it was an absolute pleasure, really. I mean, it was exhausting, you know, and quite demanding, but it's the best job in town, really. I mean, what can I say? I mean, we're extremely fortunate, to be paid, quite handsomely for doing something which gives you such enormous pleasure. And I mean, I suppose you could say you're giving pleasure to other people too, but I mean, from a personal point of view, I mean, you're spoiled rotten, really. I mean, anybody who's in a rock and roll band that's successful really shouldn't be complaining about anything.
Could those days ever return when you'll do another final world tour, bringing these songs back to life?
Oh gosh, well, that's a big question. I mean, I am asked that quite a lot, and I don't really know the answer to it, to be honest, Alex. I really don't. So I can't really comment on it.
How demanding were the songs for Mark to sing? How difficult were the tracks to perform?
Well, we used to spend quite a lot of time rehearsing beforehand, before a tour. We'd probably spend, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, getting prepared for a tour. So musically, we were quite, quite ready, and. The way we used to approach it, to be perfectly honest, was that instead of just going up there and playing the hits and then getting off, we would try to make the show a bit more of a musical experience. So instead of having to stop at every number and get your applause, you'd sort of put one song into another song and all the rest of it. So, I mean, I suppose the longest things we ever did were usually sort of long versions of Sultans or something like that. But if you did Romeo and Juliet, there might be sort of an orchestral piece at the beginning before it led into the song, and maybe an orchestral piece at the end that led into something else. So when you're trying to do a live show, you attempt to keep the flow going. You know what I mean? So that the audience doesn't have to feel obliged to clap every 4 or 5 minutes at the end of every song.
Musically, how do you compare to 20 years ago? I mean, we've seen Whitney Houston, who's not gone down very well this year, touring big arenas, trying to recreate those massive songs like I Will Always Love You. Do you worry that it would be as good as the old days? Is it best leaving it in the past?
I think there's an element to that. When you try and recreate something, you try and recreate the energy, if you like. I mean, you've got to remember that, this is 1992, 91, 92 when we finished that On Every Street tour. That's 20 years ago. Well, I was 40 then. It's not something you can't really go off around the world and do 250 dates when you're 60 unless you're mad. You know what I mean?
Or got a tax bill to pay.
And that's what well, there's that as well. But when you're in your 30s and your early 40s, you can do that kind of work. You can put that kind of energy in. I mean, that last Every Street tour was 250 odd shows in a year and a half. Well, that's a lot of work. I mean, as I said to somebody else the other day, and they didn't believe me, actually. They looked at me as if I was mad. And I mean, we just done 3 dates in Germany, and some of the guys in the band were exhausted, and I said, "My God, you guys don't know what's going on here." I said, "This is just tickling the surface." But anyway, I don't think there's any. To go back to your original question, I don't think there's any point in trying to recreate the past. I think it's very dangerous. I think if Mark and I did something, it would be some sort of charity thing or something, and not because we're big into charities. I mean, obviously we do bits and pieces ourselves, but just because, there'd have to be a good reason behind it.
Is it literally the case that one stadium blends into another when you're on those massive tours?
There's going to be an element of that. There are obviously some that stand out. I do remember on that tour in '91 that we did 30 dates without a day off in Europe, and not one of the dates was less than 20,000 people. And after about 20 of these, we got to another dressing room, and somebody turned around and he said, "Where are we?" And I said, "I haven't got a bloody clue." I mean, I literally didn't know where I was. And if I hadn't looked at the street signs or looked at my itinerary, I probably wouldn't have known. I mean, it does get a little bit like that, and that is the danger of touring, in a sense, on that kind of level.
And you're not here talking to me because you love me. You've got products to promote. We're going to talk about your personal tour in a bit, but I know there's a new DVD out, isn't there?
Yeah, they've got this Blu-ray thing of Alchemy that's just come out, and the visuals they've done something is fantastic. I mean, and Chuck Ainley's done a great job on the sound as well, because you are talking about sounds. You're talking about digital sound now, which you can really improve things and clean things up a bit. And nothing's been changed; it's just exactly as it was. But you can really make these things very fine to listen to now, and I think that's what people expect. I mean, we are living in a world of technology where things have advanced considerably over the last 20 years.
And as for looking in the full-length mirror the other week and then seeing yourself on this DVD, is it slightly depressing?
Well, it's funny because my children, my 12-year-old daughter, sort of looked at something the other day, and she said, "God, Dad," she said, "you've had a lot of hair at one time, didn't you? All that black hair," which I did, in those early days. And I said, "Yeah, but things change. As you get older, you can't keep that unless you want to wear a wig or something." And I said, "And that's not me, really." I'm very happy at this particular stage in my life, and I always find it quite bizarre when you see, I'm mentioning no names, you see, old rockers trying to look as if they're 20 years old or something, or 30 years old. I think it's a bit bizarre.
John Illsley, really lovely to talk to you again. As you know, I just am so in love with Dire Straits. I never get bored of playing them or hearing them. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. Good luck with everything. JohnIllsley.com is the place to find out about the latest tour. And we'll talk to you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.